The field has already responded. It is not about to respond. It will not respond when you are more aligned, when your frequency is cleaner, when you have done more inner work. It has already responded. The answer is present in your life right now, embedded in circumstances, in encounters, in opportunities, in inner movements that you recognized as something smaller than they really are. You simply did not know what it was. And this is the most silent, most persistent, and most universal problem on the path of those who awaken to conscious creation. It is not lack of alignment. It is not a limiting belief that still needs to be dissolved. It is not a low frequency that needs to be elevated. It is the invisible attachment to the specific form the answer was supposed to take, which makes the real answer invisible while you continue waiting for the one you designed internally. Let me describe precisely what this has looked like for you. You did the work. With genuine seriousness, not as a Sunday pastime, but as a real practice that cost time, energy, and real transformation. There was an initial awakening, a moment when the veil lifted enough for you to see that reality has layers most people never notice. And from that moment on, you built a practice. Meditation, visualization, frequency work, clearing beliefs, aligning states. You were not superficial about it. You went deep. And there are results. Not just any results, real results. Genuine changes in the quality of perception, in the way you inhabit the present moment, in the clarity with which you see your own patterns. The inner work was real and produced real transformation. But there is an area, probably more than one, where what you intended with all that clarity simply did not appear in the way it was supposed to. Where the work was done carefully, the alignment was genuine, and the expected result remained expected for months, maybe longer. And then the most natural interpretation available appeared. I need to do more. I need to refine more. There must be something I still haven't understood, some block I haven't dissolved yet, some residual belief still operating beneath the surface, preventing the field from responding the way it should. So you went deeper, more practice, more clearing, more inner work, more alignment with more care and consistency. And the field continued doing what the field does, responding, moving, sending circumstances, organizing encounters and opportunities, but rarely in the way you expected. Rarely with the appearance, the timing, or the trajectory you had internally designed as what the answer should look like when it finally arrived. And you interpreted this mismatch between the form you expected and the form that arrived, not as the signature of how the field actually responds, but as evidence that the field had not truly responded yet. That interpretation is the problem, not the field. This error of interpretation is what separates people who consciously create from people who consciously create, but only recognize what they created much later, when the answer that came disguised finally reveals what it was. Quantum physics calls the collapse of the wave function the moment when the field of possibilities assumes a specific form when it is observed. What is rarely mentioned in these conversations is that the collapse never produces exactly what the observer anticipated. It produces the closest available analog under the current conditions. And the observer who does not recognize analogs, who only recognizes exact correspondences, will continue not receiving what the field is delivering. You are not here by accident. You arrived because at some level your consciousness already sensed that something in your relationship with the field's answers was not quite right. A way of looking at what arrives that is leaving passages closed that should be open. Less than 1% of people in serious spiritual practice ever examine this specific level of the problem. Most remain in the cycle of more alignment, more practice, more waiting, without realizing that the field is not what has been silent. Leaving this video before the end would waste exactly what brought you here. The awareness, even if not yet fully articulated, that something in this equation is being misread. And there is a question that will remain alive in you as we move forward. A question that only closes at the end. If the field has already responded, why doesn't the answer look the way it should? And what exactly determines the form the answer takes? Before understanding what is changing, we need to look at what has always been blocking you. The most universal behavior among people practicing conscious creation is checking whether the result has appeared. Not once, constantly. With a quality of attention that is actually the opposite of the state that creates. Attention oriented toward the absence of what has not yet arrived, toward what is not yet visible, toward the space between what is and what should be. An attention that, by its very structure, is creating the emotional state corresponding to "it hasn't arrived yet," which is exactly the state from which the field continues producing "it hasn't arrived yet." You were taught that checking is the problem. That attachment to the result lowers your frequency. That you need to trust and let go. And you tried. Genuinely. But the real problem is not the checking. It is the model from which the checking emerges. There is a mental model, built with the best intentions, but built in a way that creates systematic invisibility about what the field's answer should look like. This model has specific characteristics, an approximate timing for when the answer should arrive, a specific path through which it should manifest, and a recognizable form that would allow you to identify it as the answer to that specific request. And while this model remains active, attention will automatically classify everything that does not match it as absence of response. Meanwhile, the field is responding. The question is not whether the field is responding. The question is whether what arrives has the form that the model recognizes as an answer, or whether it has another form, equally functional and equally aligned with the direction of the original intention, but dressed in an appearance that the model classifies as something else. Expected answer versus the field's real answer. These are the two poles. And most manifestation practices work exclusively on aligning the first, making the intention clearer, more specific, better formed, more charged with genuine belief, without ever questioning the model of how the answer should appear when it arrives. This is like tuning a radio with increasing precision to a frequency that is not the one the station is broadcasting on. It doesn't matter how much you refine the receiver, it will become more and more precise on the wrong frequency. The station will not appear because you are searching in the wrong place, not because the station is not broadcasting, but because the recognition criteria is calibrated to the wrong frequency. The neuroplasticity of attention, the pattern by which the nervous system learns to filter what enters as relevant and what passes as background noise, is trained by the internal model of what the answer should be. Circumstances that do not match the model are classified as noise before they are processed as information. They pass unnoticed, unreceived. Without producing the movement they would produce if they were recognized for what they are. And then, months later, sometimes years later, something in hindsight reveals their nature. The conversation that seemed casual was the opening for what you had asked for. The opportunity that seemed too small was the path to what had been intended. The adverse circumstance that looked like an obstacle was the necessary condition that made what you asked for possible. And in retrospect, you realized the field had answered, and that you spent months continuing to practice alignment for an answer that had already arrived, disguised.